Let me just say thanks to all of you for being here, and let me tell you how happy I am to be here. Now, some of you know that I grew up working at my dad's bar, just a few miles down the road from here. I mopped floors, waited tables, tended bar. I put myself through college working odd jobs and night shifts, and eventually ran my own small business. Back before I was representing the people of the 8th Congressional District of Ohio in the House of Representatives, I was representing manufacturers in the packaging and plastics industries. It wasn't always the most glamorous work, but like millions of Americans who run a small business, we poured our heart and soul into this to make it a successful business. We got passionate about things like component parts for a brand new, state-of-the-art industrial broom. Yeah, that broom really was indestructible. I really still have a little twinge of pride when I think about that broom. Now, I know it's something that many of you could chuckle about. And sure, if you weren't around to witness it, it might seem a little mundane. But to me back then, I got to tell you, it meant the world. It meant putting food on the table for my wife and kids. It meant putting presents under the Christmas tree. It meant jobs and secure benefits for my employees. And it meant security for the present and, frankly, hope for the future. Every American who takes pride in their work can relate to that. Whether you push a mop, run a backhoe, lay shingles, tend bar, or even serve in the United States Congress, we Americans take pride in our work. Now, most of you know I did all of those rotten jobs, and you've heard me say this before. I've had every rotten job there ever was. But I got to tell you, I was grateful to have every single one of them. Now, let me be crystal clear, if it isn't clear already, that this speech is about jobs. Why? Because the American people are still asking the question, where are the jobs? And this coming election is about one issue: jobs. It's about jobs that were promised to the American people by the current administration, but never delivered. It's about the jobs our economy should be creating right now, but isn't creating because of the policies that are coming out of Washington. It's about the jobs our children deserve in the future, but may never have because Washington is burying them under a legacy of debt. This morning we got the latest national jobs report from the Department of Labor. It looks a lot like the reports we've seen every month since President Obama signed the stimulus spending bill into law. Unemployment is high, millions of Americans are out of work, private sector job creation remains flat. That's what you got for your $787 billion worth of spending. High unemployment, a bigger government, and an economy struggling to create jobs. The upcoming election is a referendum. As Americans, we have to decide. Do we want another 2 years of job-killing policies coming out of Washington? Or have we had enough? I'm a small businessman at heart, and always will be. Running a small business here in Westchester was one of the proudest times of my life. And it gave me a perspective on our country that I've carried with me throughout my time in public service. Family-owned operations like my dad's bar, like the business that I ran, or here with Mark's business. That's what powers the American economy. They employ a quarter of the workers in our country and created the majority of new jobs over the last decade. Small businesses like these are essential to the American dream, and right now, that dream is under siege. I ran for Congress back in 1990 because of what I saw happening to small businesses in America. I got tired of watching Washington choke the goose that was laying the golden egg. The federal government was getting too big, too intrusive, and too expensive. And politicians who had no understanding of the private sector talked about the importance of creating jobs and then forced policies on American small businesses that made their job of creating jobs even harder. Elected officials with no understanding of how our economy works spent money with reckless abandon, running up the deficit, and telling us we could pay for it all by raising your taxes. It was clear they believed the engine of prosperity in America was government itself. The thinking went like this: if you want more jobs, then spend more money, collect more taxes, redistribute those taxes from the federal level, and make government bigger. Now, if you've been paying any attention at all to the Obama administration, it's thinking like this that may sound familiar, because it certainly isn't new. In fact, there's nothing new about it. And anyone who's ever created a private sector job in America can tell you that it's just dead wrong. The truth of the matter is this: our economy is built on freedom. And you don't get to prosperity by taking freedom away from the people who create jobs. You achieve prosperity by getting government out of their way. The greatest threat to job creation in our country is the flawed idea that we can tax, spend, and borrow our way to prosperity. The halls of power in our government right now are filled with people stubbornly devoted to the tired old idea that government can create prosperity by spending and borrowing. And for the past 4 years, they've been running Congress. For the past 20 months, they've controlled our entire government, from the White House to Capitol Hill. 500 miles away from here in Washington, a spending binge is going on that threatens our prosperity. And small businesses, the engine of job creation in America, are gripped by uncertainty. Under President Obama and Speaker Pelosi, Washington has been throwing everything at them but the kitchen sink. First, it was a stimulus that shipped jobs overseas to China instead of creating jobs here at home. A few months later, they came the threat of a new national energy tax that they called cap and trade. Then it was Obamacare with its unconstitutional mandates, job-killing tax hikes, and paperwork requirements. And now President Obama and his team are supporting a tax hike that the nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation says will raise taxes on 50% of all small business income. That means hundreds of thousands of private sector companies face the prospect of a job-killing tax hike on January the 1st. This company right here could be one of them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not what Americans asked for when they sent then-Senator Obama to be our president in the Oval Office. And the pink slips shouldn't be going to workers here in Ohio. They should be going to the members of President Obama's economic team. At a healthcare summit back in February, President Obama told us it's okay to have deep philosophical differences and different visions for where we would lead our country. And he said, that's what elections are for. Over the past 2 years, the governing party in Washington has been deeply committed to the tired old notion that our nation can spend and borrow its way back to prosperity. 20 months ago, Americans were told that if we just had the courage to let the government borrow $1 trillion more from our children and grandchildren, then let members of Congress and bureaucrats sprinkle that money around, magical things would happen. Unemployment would go no higher than 8%. That's what they told us. We'd create millions of jobs immediately, most of them in the private sector. Guess what? It didn't happen. The president and his allies went behind closed doors and wrote the biggest pork barrel spending bill in American history. They rushed it through Congress without giving legislators the chance to read it, much less the American people. They mocked us for asking for more time to let Americans see what was actually in the bill, and told us we were committing political suicide by opposing them. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues and I stood united, we stood together, and we voted no. They promised all the spending would stimulate the economy and create jobs right away. It didn't happen. Asked to change his economic team and stop the spending spree in Washington, the president refused. He promoted one of the architects of this failed stimulus plan and requested more stimulus spending for next year. Americans said stop, but no one stopped. The president and his party just kept on spending. The same thing happened on health care. The president and his allies promised Americans a health care bill that would lower health care costs. They also promised that nobody would be forced out of their current plan. And the president said, if you like your current health care plan, you can keep it. Well, guess what? It didn't happen. The Obama administration's own chief actuary for Medicare and Medicaid says that the president's health care law doesn't lower costs, it raises them. And millions of Americans are about to be forced out of their own health care plans. You know, the American people asked President Obama and Speaker Pelosi to scrap the health care bill and start over on a smaller, common sense plan that our nation could afford. It didn't happen. They ignored the people and they rammed it through anyway. The people around Washington haven't been listening. You know, the American people say one thing and they see their government do something else. People keep asking me, John, what can we do about it? Well, my friends, as the president said, that's what elections are for. Now, the American people have been crystal clear about what they want. More jobs, less spending, and a more open Congress that respects the wishes of the American people and abides by the Constitution. If those things aren't going to happen, then we need a new majority in Congress that will stand up to President Obama and insist that he starts listening to the American people. Back in May, my colleagues and I launched a project called America Speaking Out. And the goal was to craft a new governing agenda for America by listening to the American people. We spent the whole summer doing that, here in the 8th Congressional District and all across America. And 2 weeks ago, we unveiled the product of that effort. We call it a Pledge to America. The pledge is not an all-inclusive party platform. It's not a long-range agenda to address every challenge that faces our country. The pledge is a set of first principles. Actions the American people are demanding be taken right now. Things that we could do, Speaker Pelosi would call the House back in session and bring them to a vote. There's a job creation plan that starts with stopping all the tax hikes and eliminating uncertainty for small businesses like this one to help them get back to creating jobs. We want to give small businesses a deduction of up to 20% of their income so they'll have money to start hiring again. There's a plan to end the spending spree in Washington that's hurting our economy and hurting our children's future. Our plan cuts spending immediately, back to pre-stimulus, pre-bailout levels. Then we impose strict spending caps, enforceable caps to get spending under control and keep it under control. There's a plan to repeal Obamacare and replace it with common sense reform. We can replace that bill with common sense reforms that will lower health care costs instead of killing jobs and driving our country into bankruptcy. And then there's a plan to make changes to Congress itself. The American people The American people deserve the respect of being allowed to read the bills that Congress is working on before they come to us. And the pledge would guarantee them that right. The pledge also calls for changes in House rules to make spending cuts easier and spending hikes harder to get passed. We're also calling for an end to the so-called comprehensive bills that lump issues that have nothing to do with each other together. The very structure of Congress today is rigged in favor of spending. So if we're going to confront the massive challenges that lie ahead for our country, the American people know that this has to change. The bottom line is this. To help our economy create jobs, we have to stop all of the coming tax hikes, and we have to cut spending. And to get all of this done, we need to change the Congress itself now. My friends, this is a new way forward in Congress, something that hasn't been tried in Washington. You know, the pledge to America is a break not only from the direction which President Obama is headed, but it's also a break from the direction that Republicans were headed when we last had the opportunity to govern. And I can promise you, if we're entrusted with the opportunity to govern, we're going to do things differently. The American people deserve nothing less, and we will accept nothing less, and I will accept nothing less. If you go to our Pledge for America, there's a preamble. And in the preamble we state in part, America is an inspiration for those who yearn to be free and have the ability and dignity to determine their own destiny. Whenever the agenda of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to institute a new governing agenda and set a different course. These first principles were proclaimed in the Declaration of Independence. They were enshrined in the Constitution and have endured through hard sacrifice and commitment by generations of Americans. In a self-governing society, the only bulwark against the power of the state is the consent of the governed. And regarding the policies of the current government, the governed do not consent. Ladies and gentlemen, your government has not been listening. Your government is disrespecting you, your family, your job, your children. Your government is out of control. Do you have to accept it? Do you have to take it? No! Hell no, you don't! Remember what President Obama said during the health care summit. That's what elections are for. Thomas Paine, one of the founders of our country, wrote in his book Common Sense that we have it in our power to begin the world all over again. Well, in just 25 days, voters will have a chance to do just that. And I'm not just talking about Republican voters. I'm talking about Republicans, independents, and discerning Democrats. All of us have a chance to come together and to put our country back on track. We can start over. We can help small businesses get back to creating jobs. We can cut spending, and we can fundamentally change the way Washington does business. It starts with putting a new majority in charge of the United States Congress on November 2nd. We can send Speaker Pelosi and her allies all back home. Now, here in the 8th Congressional District of Ohio and across our nation, Americans are speaking out like never before. I'm honored and humbled to represent this great community in the Congress, and I ask for the honor of your vote once again on November 2nd, so that we can give our nation the fresh start that it needs. The government that our children deserve is within our grasp, and it starts next month. And it starts with throwing out the politicians who aren't listening and giving the chance to a new Congress who will listen to the American people. I want to thank all of you very much for all of the support that you've given me over the years. I want to thank you for all the friendship and love. And I want to say to all of you, may God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.